Hey everybody, welcome to another CrushLivePoker.com hand review. And today we're going to take a look at a couple of hands featuring one of the regulars on the show, legendary Garrett. Him getting bluffed and also running a big bluff. Live at the Bike, of course, streams every Tuesday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific time. If you're interested in playing online poker for real money, there's a new app called PKC, which is a mobile platform. You can check out some information in the description about that and also watch a video about PKC at the end. So in this particular hand, this was towards the end of the night on that big night where we saw the largest pot in the history of Live at the Bike. So Andy was stuck quite a bit, over $300,000. And the hand starts off with Bill Klein making a pretty light raise here to 600. The game was playing 100, 100, 200 with a 200 ante. Sometimes they were straddling, but in this particular game, this particular hand that was not straddled. So he opens with ace-8 of clubs at 600. And Andy calls in the big blind, and because there's three blinds, Garrett closed the action in the straddle and had Jack-10 of hearts and decided to squeeze to 3,000. Sometimes you can call with this hand. Sometimes you can 3-bet. I think that Garrett thought that with the extra dead money of Andy calling in there that it was worth a 3-bet. Got over to Bill, and Bill's really in a tough spot here. I think I probably would have just folded ace-8 of clubs. I mean, he does have ultimate position over the field. Ace-8 suited not super strong, and I don't think that Garrett's going to be all that light in this spot. But he did end up calling, and that also brought in Andy as well with King 9 suited. So with the pot being 9,300, we went to the flop, and the board came out King of hearts, 9 of spades, 5 of spades, of course, giving Andy top 2 pair. Now, Andy's going to check over to Garrett, who's the pre-flop raiser. Garrett is going to bet 5,000, which is just over half the size of the pot. He has a gut shot to a queen. He also has backdoor hearts. I think if you were to have Jack-10 suited maybe without a backdoor, he might have checked here. He's going to be betting his front door flushes and ones with backdoors as well. That's sort of the power of suited hands. Bill doesn't have anything to do but fold, and he does. And of course, it gets back over to Andy, and Andy has a decision on whether or not he wants to slow play or check raise right away. Because Garrett is showing so much strength by basically 3-betting pre-flop and betting into two people, Andy decides to fast play his hand, and I do like the play from out of position. You certainly are incentivized to fast play from out of position, and he check raises to 14,300. Now, one thing of note, Andy actually has about 55,000 more than what the graphic is showing, so he actually starts the hand with about 135,000 in his stack, and that's going to come into play. I mean, Garrett's got to call about 9,300 more when you take a look and, what are your chances of hitting a gut shot? Well, he's got about 4 outs. He's got about maybe one chance in 11. Can he make 10 to 1 on the call here, which would be like another 90,000 from the pot and also from Andy's stack? And he can do that. He also has position, so he might be able to represent spades here as well. He can also pick up a backdoor heart draw. It's much easier for him to continue here when Bill doesn't call because he is basically closing the action, so he does call. So the turn comes out a pretty interesting card. It's the 7 of diamonds, and that actually improves Garrett's hand. He now picks up sort of a hidden double gutter. He's got a gutter to a queen and also a gutter to an 8. With the pot being just under 38,000, Andy, of course, continues to bet, and he bets about 24,600. And there's really nothing Garrett's going to be able to do here but just call. I mean, he is going to be getting almost 3 to 1 here. And of course, there are implied odds if he hits his hand, if Andy had a set and a queen or an 8 roll off, something like that. And again, of course, there's the possibility that he could represent the front door flush draw. So he makes the call, and the pot now is $87,100. So we roll the river, and the river is the Jack of spades. Now, Andy has about 95,000 or so left in his stack. With King 9 top 2, basically with Garrett calling the check raise and the bet on the turn, I think Andy's play here definitely is to check. I don't think he can get really value from worse because, of course, if Garrett were to have like aces or ace king and was holding on, Andy, if he's check raising a range of two pair plus and flush draws, he of course has gotten there. So there's really not a whole lot of value here in betting. So he checks it over here to Garrett. And Garrett, of course, if he did have like aces or ace king, would most likely check it back in this spot. However, Garrett, of course, is, a poker genius. He knows what's going on. He knows that Andy is representing much, much better than the jack that he just ran into, basically. And it's unlikely that Andy would be check raising on a flush draw, then to check the river. So some people here might think that they have a tiny bit of showdown value and check behind, not Garrett. He rightly recognized the situation and realized that he needed to turn his jack into a bluff, and he decided to basically polarize, which means represent basically a flush or a bluff. In this case, he was bluffing, and he decided to go all in.
All in?
And he is going to bluff at it. And Andy folds. Wow. Garrett gets it through. So obviously Garrett looks like a genius, but there's another side to this. You don't win every single pot that you play in. And this hand was played, I would say, a few minutes before, and it was right after the big, big pot between Jackie and Andy that ended up being the biggest pot in the history of Live at the Bike. This is also one of the rare times that I actually saw somebody cover Garrett at the table. Jackie starts this hand with about 412,000 and Garrett has 345,000, playing 100, 100, 200 with no straddle. Garrett picks up a couple of black jacks from under the gun, decides to raise it to 600, which is 3x. Jackie makes a pretty light call here in the cutoff, not closing the action with 10-8 offsuit. I would probably just fold that hand. Brings along Dan with ace-10 offsuit in the small blind, and Andy also completes in the straddle with ace-4 offsuit. So we see a four-way pot with about $2,700 in it. So the board comes out, Jack of diamonds, 6 of hearts, 3 of clubs. And of course, Garrett, the pre-flop raiser, is staring at top set. Now, I'm not a huge fan of slow playing, but sometimes when you flop top set and the board is somewhat disconnected, there is a time to slow play because most of your opponents aren't really going to have anything. I mean, you're covering the entire board. You actually want to allow them to catch up. On this particular board, there wasn't really any flush draws. I mean, there were a couple really small straight draws, but I don't hate the check here by Garrett, whatsoever. Andy checks, Garrett decides to check, and Jackie now starts a bluff. He has 10-8 offsuit, so he's got a couple of backdoor straight draws, and he decides to bet about half the size of the pot, 1,300 into 2,700. Obviously, Dan and Andy both fold, and it's back around to Garrett. And this is kind of an interesting spot for him because he's slow playing. He's heads up. There aren't any other people in the pot. So if he was going to check the flop, it probably makes sense just to call. And that's what happens. He makes the call, and we roll to the turn. So the turn's the deuce of hearts, and 3 jacks is no longer the nuts as 4-5 comes in. It's unlikely that Jackie, I mean, it's possible Jackie could have 4-5 suited, but probably unlikely. Garrett now checks again, and with the pot being $5,300, Jackie now bets pretty large. He bets 3,600. And this is kind of interesting because this is really where Garrett kind of has a decision to make. He's out of position, which is a disadvantage because if he does slow play here and just call, he might not get a bet on the river. However, if he does raise, he looks really strong because he doesn't have a whole lot of 4-5 suiteds in his opening range from under the gun. So he's really looking like he has pocket jacks. The other thing, of course, is because he sort of covers the board, he wants to allow Jackie basically to bluff, which is what he is doing. So if he makes a check raise here, Jackie's just basically going to fold all his bluffs. So it kind of makes sense for him to continue to check call here and then check raise the river, depending on sizing and depending on what types of rivers come out. So he makes the call, and we go to the river. So with the pot being about 12,500, we see the river as the 9 of hearts. And I thought that this was kind of interesting here too when I was doing the live commentary, depending on the sizing that Jackie used if he did bet the river. You know, it's questionable now whether or not Garrett's going to raise because he now loses to a backdoor flush as well. This is really important to look at the distribution of the suits on the flop. It's always interesting and important to look at board distribution on rainbow boards to see what is possible in terms of a backdoor flush. If I was Garrett, I would take a look here at the suits of my hand. Garrett does not have the Jack of Hearts in his hand, and that's really, really important. So he decides to check it over to Jackie, and quite surprisingly, Jackie decides to take a 2x pot size bet. This was actually one of the larger overbets that we saw all night long. Now, this gives Garrett much worse of a price. The pot's going to be 37,500. 25,000 for Garrett to call. And again, Jackie is polarizing himself with this big bet. He is basically saying that I have a flush, I have a straight, I might have a set of 6s or 3s that I played hard throughout the hand, or I have a bluff. There's no way that Jackie is taking this kind of value line with a hand like King Jack or Jack 10. Jack 9 suited is very, very unlikely because Garrett holds the jacks. So it's really a big hand here or a bluff. Again, going back to Garrett's hand, it's really important to note that he does not have the Jack of Hearts in his hand. It's not possible for Jackie to have, say, middle pair and a flush draw because the 6 of Hearts is out there. He could maybe have like Ace 3 of Hearts, which would have been bottom pair, turn the nut flush draw, and bet the river. We talk about the concept of MDF. And what does MDF speak about, or what does MDF mean? It means minimum defense frequency. If someone bets the size of the pot at the end, basically you have to call with half of the hands that you get to the river with in order to make a bluff from them non-profitable, because if someone bets the full size of the pot, their bluffs only need to work 50% of the time for it to be profitable. In this particular case, however, because Jackie is betting 2 times the size of the pot, his bluff actually needs to work about 2/3 of the time, 66 to 67%. Again, it's not a bet that we usually see a lot in No Limit Hold'em. Flipping back to Garrett, that means that he needs to call with the top 33% of hands that he gets here with. And, if you're looking strictly at minimum defense frequency, pocket jacks is certainly going to be in the top, say, third of hands that Garrett gets to the river with here. But we all make live exploits. And again, this really was the first overbet of the entire night. And Garrett obviously thought about it for quite some time and then ended up making his decision. Oh, and Garrett lays it down. Wow. 2x the river by Jackie with total air. Unbelievable. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And of course, you can check out Live at the Bike every Tuesday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific time. And if you're interested in checking out PKC, click on the video right there.